guys, I hope you enjoy some of those clips. That video will be out on December 14th, so stay tuned for that. I'm excited to show the actual full video. Pretty much all of it was shot on the Blazar Remus, and I think you guys are gonna be pretty blown away by what we were able to pull out of these lenses. I low-key love these. These are another like affordable pair of Anamorphics, but the big difference is we finally have barrel distortion and we don't have like the super streaky flares. I am beyond excited for these new Blazar Remus, and I think they're going to stir the pot because they are far from perfect, but that is the reason I love them. So let's just get into this. In this review, I hope I don't come off too ranty. I want to do my best to allow you guys to form your own opinions outside of marketing jargon on thinking you need cleaner, more clinical, sharper glass. Because to me, character is better. First off, let me address the elephant in the room. I think once when people start seeing footage from these, they're going to get reminded a lot of the Atlas Mercuries. I will say right off the bat, the Mercuries are better quality overall, but they're at a totally different price point. These are under $1,000 each. I'll explain how they're doing this, and I'll explain all the downsides, but also all the upsides and why I love them. Now, let's get into the dang videos. Let's start with distortion. Pretty much all the affordable anamorphic options that we have are pincushion. I don't know if that's just easier for them to design it that way, but these are the first affordable anamorphics that have barrel distortion, which I absolutely love. For some reason, when I see a pincushion anamorphic shot, I feel like it feels flat. But when you see barrel distortion, for some reason, the image just pops off of the screen. I don't know if that's because it's bringing whatever's in focus like to the forefront, but when it comes to the edge distortion, we are getting a lot of funkiness on this. Obviously, you could use that as a strong suit, or it can hurt you depending on what you're shooting. If you have two subjects edge to edge, you know, it might look a little bit weird. And so on Super 35, these are going to look a lot better if you're looking for something that's a little cleaner on the edges. But let's talk about bokeh real quick, and that will kind of explain why we're getting some of these funky edges. So for stuff like this, where we're just out here kind of shooting personal work, stuff for YouTube, I would totally use these. Obviously, if this was like a $250,000 budget, you know, type shoot, I'd probably use a higher end anamorphic, but this is getting very close. But there's some downsides to it. Obviously, you're not gonna get, you know, $10,000 worth of sharpness out of them or super clean aberrations out of them. So I kind of like all that extra character. You can say character or issues, however you want to explain it. To me, it's character. I like that the edges have some weirdness to it. I like that there's chromatic aberrations. I like that's a little bit softer. But we're shooting out here. You see there's dust everywhere. The lenses are getting tossed around. So we're really testing the build quality on these. So these are 1.5x anamorphics. So obviously we're not gonna get 2x type of bokeh in the background, but I'm realizing that a lot of the anamorphics are coming out. Why the edges are so funky is I think they're messing with the anamorphic elements distance to the spherical elements when it comes to the edges. So you'll see when I pan, the bokeh in the center looks like 1.5. When you go to the edge, it really thins out, and it kind of looks more like 2x. And so I think they're cheating some of the edges there to, you know, help us get a little bit more of that 2x look on the edges. But with that, I think that's why we're starting to get some weird curvatures, whether it's your focus point or just with the overall distortion. So personally for me, I kind of like that they do that, but obviously if you need to like really make sure that your edges are clean because, you know, you have subjects on the edges there, Super 35 mode, you're gonna be safe, but on the full frame mode, you're gonna have to be prepared to figure out the distortion in post, or maybe just use a more expensive lens that doesn't have that. Now let's talk about the flares. Blazar sent me the amber flares. I really don't like amber flares. I prefer blue traditional flares because it reminds me of all those old like Panavision films. My eyes just melt when I watch a film that's showing Panavision anamorphics. And so I prefer blue flares. Try my best not to flare these out just because I feel, I don't know, amber looks great when you're in daylight, but I just like the look of blue. Just to me, that's cinema. When it comes to affordable anamorphics, I think these are some of the best flares we have gotten so far. Sometimes, depending on what your light source is, we do get some weird, you get like really tight, thin lines with a softer flare in there. But other times you get a more natural flare. Circling back to the Atlas Mercuries again, the flares on there are amazing. And I think what's happening there is they're allowing some of the spherical elements, not just the anamorphic element, to flare out a little bit. So we get more of those soap bubbles and those second and third flares in there. But again, compared to the other anamorphics in this price range, I much prefer these ones. I just wish they were blue. I haven't seen what the blue look like either, so I don't know if they're gonna be stronger or weaker on there. I don't know. But I tried to show the flares the best I could. What's really cool is we're shooting on the 4D. The 45 millimeter bounces on the 4D perfectly fine. The 65 is a little front heavy, but I think it will balance still. The 100 millimeter, it's not too heavy, but it's a little bit too front heavy. So it will, you know, it's kind of hard to balance on there. But this is perfect for stuff like this. So you guys can see, these are super freaking tiny. Again, thanks Armando. Y'all know who Armando is. What do you think of these?
Dude, the fact that they're this small is incredible. When you told me that you had some anamorphic lens, immediately I think big, chunk of lens. And then I picked them up. I'm like, wait, I think you might have given me like a filter box or something like that, because they're freaking tiny. And I like the fact that cameras are getting smaller and smaller. And it's funny because if you look at over there, we have the red Komodo bit. We have this like really super giant lens.
10-pound lens on there.
Can I shoot with these now?
Sharpness. This is another little gripe of mine within the community of anamorphic, newcomers. A lot of people complain, oh, the anamorphic's super soft. I don't know if you guys have tried shooting $10,000 anamorphics, $40,000 anamorphics, vintage anamorphics that some of your favorite films were shot on. When they're wide open, they're insanely soft. A lot of these higher end anamorphics don't sharpen up till T4. And most anamorphics don't even go down to a T2. And I'm sure some of them could go to T2, but the manufacturers probably block you from doing that just because the image will probably fall apart. The 45 millimeter at T2 is the cleanest. And then the 65 softens up, and then the 100 millimeter we're stuck at a T2.8. So as you go up tighter in the focal lengths, they soften up more and more and more. Basically, I'm sure Anamorphic on a budget, Tito, I'm sure he's going to do a proper detailed breakdown. And so I'll put a link down his channel in the description. Typically on anamorphics, if you shoot wide open on any of them, they're going to have aberrations. They're going to be soft. There's weird stigmatisms with it. I personally love that. But I know a lot of people are like, oh, why would you can't use that? It's like, I don't think you guys understand. A lot of big DPs are artistic, creative people. They choose a lens according to the project, and they're okay. They're not looking at lens charts all the time. They're looking at if it fits the story. So please, you guys got to stop with the whole clinical BS and wide open. If that's who you are, shoot spherical. Use a G Master lens. They're great. But for everything like this is going to add so much more character and just charm to the overall, shots to this.
Thank you. Mine now.
YouTubers, silly. So fifth, this will lead me to my actual gripes and negatives to this lens. And we're going to start that with the chromatic aberration. So I do think chromatic aberrations can be tasteful. I'm pretty sure I've watched an interview with Greg Fraser. He was talking about that he kind of likes some chromatic aberrations. But personally, I don't mind a little bit of chromatic aberration. Now, when it comes to shooting wide open on these, the chromatic aberration can get a bit intense and distracting. So a little bit of aberrations, okay, but a lot, there's a thin line between acceptable and too much. So once again, on the 45, our chromatic aberration is going to be a little bit cleaner. Then as you go up in the focal lengths, it gets worse. But when you go to T2.4 and T2.8 and T4 on the 100, all the chromatic aberrations clean up a lot. You're still going to get some. And so if you're in any high contrast scenes, say if you have the sun blasting through tree leaves or something like that, that's when you're really going to see that chromatic aberration get distracting. It's kind of hard to complain about these when we're getting more Panavision type character out of a under $1,000 lens. I know some of you guys are like, oh, it looks nothing like a Panavision. I'm just saying, compared to the other lenses in this price range, this leans more towards the Panavision side versus that clean, clinical, flat, kind of sterile look that, to me, if I'm shooting anamorphic, I feel like it might be pointless to shoot anamorphic if it's clean. I might as well shoot on spherical and just put 2 to 3.9 bars on there. The next thing, the glass quality. You could tell that, at this price range, it's really hard for me to complain, but obviously Blazar sent this to me, but say if I was going to buy them, I would happily pay double the price for each of these lenses if they were to give us, better glass quality. That's the give and take. If you want affordable options, they have to throttle down parts of the lens. If you don't want to pay, $4,000 to $8,000 for a lens, you have to pick and choose where they're going to take that cost out of. So again, if they were to do a higher glass quality of these, so when we're shooting them wide open, they're not ghosting and we don't have all that halation, they're a little bit more sharper, I would happily pay $2,000 to $4,000 for one of these lenses. But with all the gripes in this video, I am beyond happy and proud to own these lenses. One, they're insanely light. Like this rig right here, it feels like nothing. Even more importantly, the Ronin 4D, the reason I haven't really shot too much on it is because there wasn't any light enough anamorphics that kind of gave the traditional anamorphic look. But now we have these. The 45 bounces on the Ronin 4D. The 65 is a little front heavy, but the motors are strong enough to hold it, but you might get vibrations at time if you push it too hard. The 100 millimeter is again almost just as light as the 65, but the weight's more forward. And so you're going to stress the motors out. I'll have to ask DJI if it's okay to stress them out that much or if it's better not to. I am just, again, beyond excited about these lenses. It's like finally a sub $1,000 tiny compact full frame 1.5x with a lot of character, and it's still a lot of usability for under $1,000. Like, wow. And this is what I mean that they're stirring the pot. I think a lot of us, when we imagine Anamorphic, we think about the characteristics that they're providing here. They're not perfect, but that is why I love the Blazar Remus.